there. Hi, everybody. I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to reading Machiavelli's Discourse. We're continuing our examination of Book 2. Today we're looking at Chapter 5. Title right there, right? The title is The Variation of Sex and Languages, together with the accident of floods or plagues, eliminate the memory of things. So therefore, in other words, the variations of sex and languages, together with the accident of floods and plagues, eliminates the memory of things. So this is the question of when does the memory of things disappear in that sense. To those philosophers who would have it that the world is eternal. Let me just make sure this is on silent so we don't get phone calls. Again, this is the world eternal. Let's say that this is Aristotle's Physics, Book 8, Metaphysics 12. On the Heavens, Aristotle, Book 1, 9. And then the Cicero Tusculan's Disputations. The classic idea. The idea is eternality of the universe. Things are eternal. In other words, the world is eternal. And believe that one could reply that if so much antiquity were true, it would be reasonable that there be memory of more than 5,000 years. If it were not seen how the memories of time are eliminated by diverse causes, of which part comes from men, and part comes from heaven. Again, this is like this is from Lycurgus de Rem Novara, Book 5, right? This claim, this is the, in other words, that there is a problem. There is the problem. Why don't we remember? Why, if the universe has been so long, the world is eternal, why don't we remember hundreds of thousands of years ago? He says we only have a tendency to have a kind of memory of things of 5,000 years ago. We don't have this long-term memory of the eternal past. And he's saying, well, there's certain things that happen. Some of the causes that eliminated those memories, the memories of the times are eliminated, he says, by diverse causes, and some of them are from men, they're human-made, and others are from heaven. Again, this is repeating like Lucretius, right? Those that come from men are the variation of sex and of languages. So therefore, the sex, sex here means the different people who band together for certain reasons. Sex usually a concept of religion, right? People of religion, certain beliefs. In other words, a sect is someone who that shares a certain set of beliefs. Okay, so therefore if we understand that, and we can even make that larger, like maybe even political organizations. People, different countries could be sects in this sense. Or the early origins of human tribes that believe certain things would form one sect. And the second thing is languages. In other words, in fact, the idea here is that language is not natural, but rather language is something that emergent from particular peoples, particular places. That language, the concept of language, this is linguistic theory from, what's the famous guy name? Oh, come on. I'm blanking. I know who I'm talking about. The famous. He's also, he's a very left wing, activist on, anti-empire. Chomsky. Noam Chomsky, as a linguist, scholar of linguists, makes the argument that the instinct to learn a language is natural to humans, but that the language itself is a construct. It is a particular man-made construct. So that the instinct or this need to have language may be something innate and human, our nature, but that therefore this is the point. This is why he says that languages and sex are these constructs of men. For when a new sect, that is a new religion emerges. So he means that very much a new religion emerges. The first concern is to extinguish the old and give itself reputation. When it occurs that the orderers of the new sect are of a different language, they easily eliminate it. So therefore, the new sect, they exterminate the language. In other words, he's making the argument of religion. He's now bringing the concept of sect wholly within the framework of religion. He moved it to religion, and this is the way it's the way we most understand it. A new sect, right? And he says that if new religion emerges, the first concern is to extinguish the old and give itself reputation. Now if the orderers of the new sects are of a different language, they easily eliminated the older sect, right? This thing is known from considering the modes that the Christian sects took against the Gentiles, right? The Gentiles, the Christians. It suppressed all its orders and all its ceremonies and eliminated every memory of that ancient theology. It is true that they did not succeed in eliminating entirely the knowledge of the things done by its excellent men. So in other words, he's saying that he says, look at the Christian sect and how Christianity exterminated the Gentiles among the European peoples, and also maybe even the pagan. There was the Gentiles usually refer to the non-Semitic peoples, right, of the Europeans. It could apply maybe also to the North people, right? It is simply just that the pagan, in other words, he doesn't use pagans, he uses Gentile. It suppressed their memories and ceremonies. It eliminated memory of their ancient theology, right? Now, it's true that not all were done, things by its excellent men. This arose from having maintained the Latin language, which they were forced to do since they had to write this new law with it. So therefore, in other words, because the Christians kept Latin and also Greek, he doesn't mention this, but Greek and Latin, because they kept these languages, they weren't totally able to forget the ancient things. Okay. Because they needed a new language, they had to write this new law with it, right? For if they had been able to write it with a new language, considering the other precautions they made, we would not have any record of past things. So, therefore, in other words, this is the reason why we still have memories of the Romans and the Greeks is because the Christians used Greek and Latin as the means of explaining their way, right? Whoever reads of the modes taken by Saint Gregory, again, Gregory, this is John of Salisbury's Politicus 8, that highlights it, right? Whatever reads the modes taken by St. Gregory and other heads of the Christian religion will see with how much obstinacy they persecuted all the ancient memories, burning the works of the poets and the historians, ruining images, spoiling every other thing that can convey some sign of antiquity. So if they added a new language to this persecution, in a very brief time, everything would be seen to be forgotten. So therefore, this is, in other words, if there's a totally new language, the language would destroy the old language and to forget the memories of it. Okay. So that the only reason why it doesn't happen per se in Europe is because Latin and Greek are still there, and because Latin and Greek are still they're the languages of the ancient pagan gods. In other words, but see, the problem with this is you can even point this into the problems of the ones who didn't use Latin, that their gods weren't recognized by the Latins and Greeks. Okay, the Norse and those people, that they survive somehow, but they don't survive because of language. So there's something we should think about carefully what he means by this. So if they had added a new language as persecution in a very brief time, everything would be seen to be forgotten. And I think that's you can even say this, that you can see the Baltic religions, the Baltic peoples, and the Baltic things, and the old Slavic people. They have very little to no memory of their pagan life. Now the Norsemen do, but it's one wonders why. And that's could it be because of the English that they impacted the Anglo-Saxon world, and the Anglo-Saxon world then preserved some of it. We don't know. I mean, that's, or because Germanic languages maintain their identity, and that therefore the Germanic languages maintain some of their old memories, and that therefore they didn't. In other words, we over time overcame Latin. That is something to think about in that sense, right? If it is therefore to be believed that what were the Christian sects wished to do against the Gentile sect, the Gentile would have done against that which is prior to it, right? Again, the Romans were far from doing so to language, writing the religion of the Etruscans, according to Livy, right? Or in other words, the Romans were far from doing so to the language and writings of the Etruscan. Livy 1, Livy 5, and Livy 7, and Livy 9, right, of the Orbis. So the Latins would have done the same thing. The pagans would have kind of made forget. There's, in other words, the religions prior to the Gentile religion, right? And because these sects vary 2 or 3 times in 5 or 6,000 years, so yes, the mathematical things. So sects will vary because these sects vary 2 or 3 times in 5 or 6,000 years. The memory of things done prior to that time is lost. And if, however, some signs of them remain, it is considered as something fabulous, and is not lent faith to, as happened with the history of Diodorus Scurrilus, which, though it renders an account of 40 or 50,000 years, is nevertheless reputed, as I believe it to be, a mendacious thing. In other words, a false thing, not telling the truth. Dissembling. It's a false. In other words, that this story of this history by Diodorus Scurrilus, this history of this 54,000 years, this secret history, this is a false thing. Now let's go to the second paragraph. All that was the first paragraph of chapter 5. As to the causes that come from heaven, they are those that eliminate the human race. Again, human generations, he says. Generations, literally, generations. Human generations. Human race, human generations. There was a extermination and reduced the inhabitants of part of the world to a few. In other words, some event, either a massive flood, the flood. The famous example what happened that we talk about the flood. Really, what happened? One of the things that argue is the land as the land mass over time between Africa and Europe. At one time they were together, and near Spain. What happened was it separated, and the water from the Atlantic started flowing in to what we call the Mediterranean, right? And what then happened was the same thing with the Dardanelles area, the separation between those areas, the water started going, and it contaminated the Black Sea. So there's this huge flood of ocean water going all across that, and it may have done this. And if we look at maps of even if we look back at 10,000 year maps, 10, 50,000 years, some maps that people estimate based upon the geographics of even Northern Europe, that there was once a plain that covered today what we consider the North Sea, right? The North Sea, the areas between the Baltic and the North Sea to England, that this was at once land. That what happened was as the climate got colder, warmer, you can say, what ended up happening was that something happened, that some event changed and the climate got warmer, and again things also not only going to say warmer, but plates moved. Okay, remember plate tectonics and these things. So therefore, over time, nature has had it that there's forces within nature that the tectonic plates separate. Tectonic plates cause cracks. Volcanoes destroys. Places that were a civilization that was based near a tectonic line, a fault or something. A series of volcanoes could wipe them out. In other words, or a tsunami, a coastal culture civilization, some earthquake on on one coast of the near the ocean caused the tsunami to wipe out. In other words, nature itself, the forces of nature can destroy something that was civilization. Something happened. Like there's the story of the Mayans, or whatever happened to the Mayans. We don't really know, right? The most important is that the last, both because it is more universal and because those who are saved are all mountain men. And of course, in other words, okay, this is the things he says: reduce the human race from inhabitants as part of it. This comes about either through plagues or through famine or through inundation of water. And it doesn't mention earthquakes and fire, volcanoes and destructions of things, but the flooding, right? The flooding. The most important is the last, right? That therefore the flooding leads to people who are mountain men. Now, you have to understand the Greece civilization Greece is more mountainous. This is what Thucydides talks about. Go read Thucydides' introduction in book one of his history of Peloponnesian War. We have a series on that, so I don't have a link to it, but you can go check the series that we did book one. He gives a history of the development of Greece, right? Why did Greece develop the way it did? And the geography of Greece is mountainous, and therefore, this is why there's not a plain. It doesn't have a simple plain. And therefore this has led to very differentiated communities, right? So therefore this is the mountains happened, the flood happened, this is the story of the loss of Atlantis, right? The great myth in the ancient world. In other words, who are saved are mountain men, of course, who, since they do not have knowledge of antiquity, cannot leave it to posterity, right? And if among them someone is saved who had knowledge of it, to make a reputation and a name for himself, he conceals it and perverts it in his mode, so that what he wished to write alone, and nothing else, remains of his successors. In other words, it becomes biased. In other words, the survivor who does it, and then he wishes to, he doesn't, he's not going to keep it for himself. He's going to redo it to make it fit his understanding, right? So they're the bias of the people who maintain the knowledge, he highlights. That these indulations, these plagues and famines come about, I do not believe is to be doubted. In other words, it's something that he believes that they come along. It is not to be doubted, because all of the histories are full of them. Because this effect of the oblivion of things is seen, and because it seems reasonable that it should be so. So therefore, this is in other words, our experience of these things. This is a very good thing. Is there's a book by what's his name? I have it over here, but it's upside down. Walter Schindler's The Great Leveler. So let me just... Oh, I can't do it. Yeah. Yeah, The Great Leveler of Violence and the History of Inequality. And talking about plagues, diseases, and wars and things like this that basically reshaped history and led to, equalizing and then basic structural change. So therefore, this is what he says. That's why I said I would think maybe that's why it's we know about this. This is something reasonable, right? We've seen it. We know it's reasonable that it be so. For as in simple bodies, when very much superfluous matter has gathered together, there nature many times moves by itself and produces a purge that is the health of that body. So it happens in this mixed body of the human race. So human, again, 7 generations in question of this idea of the human generations. Latin, Italian word is generations. Race is in other words, human. In other words, a group of humans over time, a generation, right? That when all provinces are filled with inhabitants, so that they can neither live there nor go elsewhere, since all the places are occupied and filled, and human astuteness and malignity has gone as far as they can go, the world must necessarily be purged by one of 3 modes, so that men through having become few and beaten may live more advantageously and become better, right? Tuscany was then, as was said above, Discourse 2:4, right? Tuscany, once powerful, full of religion and virtue, and had its customs and ancestral laws, all of which were eliminated by Roman power. So, as was said, the memory of its name alone remains of it. So therefore, in other words, this is the thing, that there's many modes, he says, that they can be done. And then we talked about those modes. That can be one of 3 modes, right? He says, inundations of, plagues and famines. Inundations can also be, we understand it's like floods, but war, too. War can be inundation. War, massive war, can lead to things. This is what Schrödinger's book on the Great Leveling, he said, the Great Wars, this levels, and that the leveling then creates equality, a certain level of equality. So let's stop here. This is where the chapter ends. If you have any comments or questions, please put them below, and I will respond to them when I see them. I'll kind of respond to them. If you've liked what we did, hit the like. Please hit the like button because it helps the algorithm. Like it. And if you liked it, you can share it on your social media. Share it with your friends. Forward it to people you think it'd be interesting. Share it far and wide. Again, in other words, and then last but not, like, comment, like, share, subscribe. Subscribe, why? Because it gets you the notifications of things. But again, it also helps build all of these 4 things I mentioned, helps build the algorithm up, so that people searching for these kind of topics, like I'm looking for Machiavelli discourses, will run across our chapters here, our things we're doing here. Another thing you can do is, if you didn't like it, you can always thumbs down it, but say why in the comment. What didn't you like? So, because we're doing this for kind of learning purposes and trying to, you can say, oh, the fan in the background. I'm sorry, the fan needs to be in the background right now because of getting circulation of air. Otherwise, it would be just not so pleasant to do things. But you can say why, give substantive reasons, and maybe I did something wrong. Maybe you think I misrepresented something. Say so in the comments, so help other people. And I may respond to it and say, maybe you're right, or again, this is a pedagogical reason. Another thing you can do is you can follow me on social media. The links are below for those who want to follow me. I don't really. I have very few things on Facebook public, and I'm very touchy about friends. So I mean, X is probably better, or the other social media things I'm more likely to be posting things publicly on. I should rearrange that. Put Facebook last. Another thing I should tell you about is if you want to know more about me as a scholar and as a researcher, I would recommend that you go look at the academic social media. You can check out my check out me as a scholar and check out my scholarship. Another thing you do is you want to help me to do what I do. You can do so either through two ways: through Patreon or Subscribestar. Very few people do this. I understand this is not something I'm not as sexy as some people, but I hope people would do this because it helps. It will help defer costs of things. That's or another way you can help is to buy one of my books. The current available books are listed below. There's a book I should add on it, the ebook that's available. It's available on most ebook platforms. The Centrality or the Polis, or it's the not Centrality, the Polis as the ancient form of the political article. This is probably going to be turned into another book. I might eventually publish in a hard copy, but the first volume is focused on the ancient world. I think it's done, and that was. And someone said, "Why don't you publish it as an ebook?" So I published it as an ebook. Another thing you can do is, if you're not going to buy it directly, book directly at your local bookstore, you can do it through an online distributor like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Libris, Book Depository, or through the publishers themselves. Well, that's it. We will now look at Chapter 6. So take care and have a great day. Bye-bye.